Hello, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the film. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Lynn. I work at BritDoc. I'm the film officer for BritDoc. And I've had BritDoc has a passing relationship with Quest, actually. So in the development stages, Quest was a project for Good Pitch. And so I have some passing, relationship with Jonathan, who I welcome, who's the director. So if you'd like to come in and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for Good Pitch. I want to shout out to Dogwolf, too, our UK distributor. Thank you guys for sticking around. What you guys just saw was totally a team effort. So I want to bring up my producer, Sabrina Schmidt Gordon, and our editor, Lindsey Utes. Couldn't have happened without these guys.
So I'm going to get straight into it. My first question is actually, watching it, I was amazed by the length of time dedicated to the project. So it's over 10 years. This was, a work in progress. And I was wondering, what was it? I mean, we see it in the final product in the film, how captivating the Rainey family is and the Northern Philadelphia community. But, what convinced you for 10 years that there was a story to be told? What was it?
Yeah. Well, I think, there was, before it was a film, it was sort of this friendship, this relationship. And I really fell in love with the community and then sort of fell in love with this family. And it was just, again, it started off as a photography project. And there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of the film. Is it going to be good? Is anyone going to want to see it? But just being very process-oriented, I loved just hanging out with these guys. And the camera and the filming was just an excuse to hang out with my friends as they were, doing music, doing incredible things. And so that's sort of what kind of kept things, moving all the years. It was just the relationship, really.
So you must have close ties with Philadelphia as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in Pittsburgh, so the other side of the state, but after high school, I moved to Philadelphia. So prior to meeting the Raineys, I'd been in Philadelphia for 6 years and just really fell in love with just the city and just was trying to figure out kind of when this started, how can I contribute to the community? And really kind of was thinking, I'm going to do art, but then maybe I need to be a social worker or a nurse, or how do I contribute? And it was really through this that I just saw that doing art together collaboratively can be a way of building community and hopefully bringing healing and support and connections. And so that's sort of how that worked out. It was a process of discovery, over many years. And the Raineys, in some ways, they considered me one of their artists too. And they nurtured me the way that you see them nurturing Price or these other guys. They just brought me on as just another artist and kind of put up with me and the hassle of having a camera following them. It's we just want to support John, whatever, and, so that's how it worked out.
And with that, how did you, Sabrina, come on board? You weren't there for the 10 years.
No, I was not there for 10 years. And I'm actually based in New York. And the way John and I met, we have a mutual documentary filmmaker friend. And this is John's first film. I'm not sure if that's, you all know that. I think you made reference to that earlier in the introduction. So he had all this footage, and then he became part of, actually, shout out to IFP, who has a documentary lab program. And so John had tons of footage and an idea and didn't know what to do next. And so I think David, who was our mutual producer friend, said you need a producer, you need a team. You can't keep doing this whole thing by yourself. And so he reached out to me. And, I've been making documentaries as a producer and editor primarily for more years than I want to admit. And I've been on festival juries and panels and things like that. And I happened to be on a funding panel that John had previously applied to and had not received the money. So I remember when he emailed me and I realized who it was. I was oh my God, it's that guy who we didn't give money to, among many other people who didn't get money. I mean, it's crazy, competitive, crazy thing. But anyway, he reached out to me. I couldn't really tell him because I didn't know if it had been announced yet or whatever, but I gave him my feedback about what I thought was really wonderful about the material he had, what the challenges I thought would be present in telling this story, and then eventually, and he said, "Oh yeah, I heard from such and such panel that I didn't, whatever." And I was yeah, I was there, and then that's how
I seriously almost passed out. I was wait, my world is
So that's kind of how we got together, and one of the things that even though when folks don't get money for a film, I mean, it has nothing really to do with, frankly, that it's not good or something like that. It's just very competitive, and sometimes it's very borderline. You really like so many things about the material. But I think especially because John was like a first-time filmmaker, it was very hard to sort of figure out like, and it's very loaded material. I mean, it's just like, you know, at the end of the day, it's a story about a family, but it is like politically and, you know, and culturally like really loaded. It was just unclear how he would navigate the material. And so that was like what what we did together is kind of like sort that out and figure out how we tell this, you know, very, you know, personal, intimate, subjective story about a family, and how do we use that to sort of like illuminate, you know, the larger themes that intersect in their lives in a really like seamless way. And I think it's like a much more sort of like powerful way ultimately to look at social issues. You know, sometimes there are films that have people like explaining them to you, and then this is a film that doesn't explain anything to you, just allows you to just see how these intersect and how people function and deal with these issues on their day-to-day lives in a very personal way. And, you know, our editor here, Lindsey, did an excellent job, in my view, of really getting that balance like just right. So.
Which leads me on to my next question before I throw out to the audience. So this is for Jonathan and Lindsey. Yeah, so you've got 10 years worth of material, and the film touches upon so many themes, such as like primarily relationships, but it's also about poverty, it's about illness, it's about sexuality, it's a coming-of-age film, it's all about all of these things, it's about community. And so were there anything outside that isn't actually included in the final cut, any themes or characters even, because there's such a wealth of interesting people in the film that didn't make the final cut?
So we talked a lot about, there's another, you know, kind of artist named Pep Shooter. Oh. And just, I always like, oh, Pep, like I love this guy. I spent so much time with him, shot a bunch of music videos with him. But, you know, again, we just had a certain amount of time, and we definitely knew who we were wanted to focus on, and didn't want to kind of muddy the water with like too many different people to keep track of and whatnot. And there's some of the older footage I really fell in love with, and you know, these guys, Lindsey and Sabrina, were like, it's not quite working, you know, and so that's why you need a team. You need people to tell you like, hey, sometimes like less is more. And if it was up to me, I would have been made like a 10-hour film, and I would actually still be filming right now because it's just like, I'm not quite there. And
well,
Lindsey,
I think some of the earlier footage is interesting because you could feel watching it that the relationship was still very new. And I think the power of this film is in the strong relationship that John has with this family, and you really feel that in the access and in the way the camera sort of disappears. And that was something that was hard-earned and took time. And so I think a lot of the earlier footage, Sabrina and I both felt like, you know, it just, the relationship wasn't there yet, and so the material wasn't quite as strong as some of the later stuff. And it kind of gets, in my opinion, the material gets stronger as the relationships builds. And so there was this sort of evolution that we wanted to be true to in the edit. And so.
I mean, I just want to add too, like, it's kind of like a discovery for all of us. I mean, you know, for those, I don't know how many folks here are documentary filmmakers, but you know, you film, I always say, like, you know, you shoot your film and then you rediscover your film in the edit room, and then you kind of realize like what you really have. And I remember when, before we started editing, we were working on proposals and things like that, we were really privileging like, oh, he's been there like for 10 years, and really making it about like this sort of longitudinal thing, and a lot of people comparing it to Boyhood and things like that, and we're really kind of caught up in that, and then realized that the time is not really about, the strength of the film is not really about like, oh, we have 2007, 2008, 2009. It's really about the time investment and what that meant for the relationship that was created, so that the span of the film is not necessarily a rigorous sort of like outline of every single year, but really those moments come out of like the relationship that that John built with the Rainies. So that was actually even like a discovery for us, as like we're watching the material and we're writing about it and realizing that's not really what's interesting about the film. And similarly, like with Pep Shooter and so on, like these other characters, you know, one of the things I remember we talked about is like, you know, the film started out as, you know, John taking photographs of the of the music studio. So I think there was a way in which like the studio was kind of really privileged, and it was sort of like, how do we tell this other story around this music studio? And I think it was really flipped, that it's really about the family, and then somehow how the music studio comes in was a little much more organic than sort of like trying to really like make the case for this music studio as this contribution to the community. That sort of kind of becomes evident and emerges once we really got the focus right.
Yeah.
We've got about 5 minutes, so we can take a couple of questions from the audience, if anyone has one. Should we pass the mic? I can run over you. You want? Okay.
Hi, just like to say I thought the film was fantastic, but what was interesting, I was going to ask about the inciting incident, and obviously when the when the little girl, her eye was, that incident happened, but then there was more to it when you said, about you going into you being a part of the neighborhood. So I was going to know, so instead of asking that, I already know about how you got in there, so I want to know how, how did you feel when that all happened, in the film? I mean, because, wow, like, that just must have changed your direction on the film completely.
It changed PJ's life, so when PJ was shot in the eye by a stray bullet, and that happened in 2013, so it was almost exactly 4 years ago, really this month. And so I thought that back then it was still just me, working on the film. And so I thought like, oh, here's this interesting bookend, the 2008 election, 2012 election. At that point, I had no idea we were going to film for another, 4 years. And so it was actually editing. And then when, the crisis happened, the family got in touch with me, and I was like devastated, I was actually on another shoot. I was, on the airplane coming back to Philadelphia, just crying the whole time. Like, what can I do? And Quest, we got on the phone. I was like, what can I do? And he's like, you've been filming with us for like 5 years. This is like a major part of our story. And we want PJ to know how strong she is. We want her to see what she went through. And we want to try to make something good come out of this like horrific situation and try to use that. And so it was really the family bringing me back in to that hospital. And at that point, just the stakes were completely different. It kind of moved from this really, it was trying to avoid really the sensationalized stuff with this story, and then all of a sudden that, that sort of just, kind of forced its way in. And just like, just the stakes were higher, and just like them bringing me in, I just had this sense of responsibility and this huge weight that I wanted to just make sure we tell the story right and not have them be defined by this too. And so a lot of the reason I wanted to continue filming for so much longer after is like, this is something that they go through, but they're not defined by it. They're defined by the love that they have for each other. And really, that's what I wanted to be reflected, as opposed to here's some victims from something tragic that happened. And so, it was devastating though, for all of us. Yeah, sorry.
Unfortunately, we've been told we have to wrap up, but thank you guys for coming. Maybe you got some time outside.
Absolutely.
If you want to ask some questions to the filmmakers. But thank you guys for coming, and a round of applause for Quest.